Hello, my name is Shelley, and welcome to the 2015 Art of Education Winter Conference. I'm here to present to you some tips of how to support your English language learners in the art room. I have experience of teaching for 8 years. I have experience in the fine state of Arkansas, in the country of Honduras, and in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Welcome to my art studio, and I'm excited to share with you some tips of how you can support your ESL students in your art studio. Tip number 10, give time. Give talk time, give wait time. What is your experience with English language learners? I just gave you a significant amount of wait time. Wait time is important with your normal students, but especially with your language learners. Language learners have a longer processing time. They have to hear the question or the statement in English, and then they have to translate it into their native language, process an answer, translate it back into English, and then respond to you. So wait time is a significant thing for us to keep in mind when we're teaching language learners. Also, talk time. When you're on your carpet like this or wherever you have your discussions with your students, when you're talking about art or looking at art, listening to people talk, it's important to give your language learners an opportunity to talk because actually they have a lot more to say, although they may be very silent. Tip number 9, create a word wall. When we can connect literacy to art, that's going to help the transfer of learned vocabulary from the art studio back to the classroom. A book that I reference is called Vocabulary for the Common Core. You can find terms in here that apply in the art studio and to curriculum outside of the art studio. For example, symmetry. Of course, symmetry is an art term, but it's also a math term. So I taught a lesson this past week about symmetry, radial symmetry, and asymmetrical balance. These words work in the art studio, but they also transfer into the regular classroom. So tip number 9, create a word wall. Here we are high in the sky because time flies when you're making art. Tip number 8, teach figurative language. Figurative language can be tricky even for native English speakers, but especially for language learners. In the art studio, oftentimes I say, okay, it's time to clean up, or our time is out, and then I'll say, because time flies when you're making art, and students kind of look at me like, what are you talking about? Time flies when you're making art. Well, that's a great way to teach an idiom that time really doesn't fly, but when you're having a good time, time does fly when you're making art. Tip number 7, visuals, visuals, visuals. Visuals are critical for ESL students. Visuals help ESL students connect a picture to a word or a picture to your language. So let's start by talking about the scrap paper box. I'm sure you all have a scrap paper box because we don't throw any paper away in the art studio. Well, except little papers like this. So this is a great way to teach your English language learners that no, we don't want this kind of paper in our scrap box, but yeah, we want to cut our old paper into squares or rectangles so that later down the road we can use this paper again. Moving over to our behavior chart. In elementary school, this is an awesome way to monitor the behavior of each class. And it's a watercolor palette if you can't tell, and we have different little paint brushes, and on the paint brushes are the teachers' names. And this was a Pinterest idea, not my own, but I've taken this idea and used it to help teach language learners about color theory and warm colors on the bottom versus cool colors on the top. We want our behavior to be cool and calm and collected. So the top is where I want my wonderful wildcats to be on the purple. And then toward the bottom is the more energetic and the warm or hot colors. And we want to avoid this type of behavior. And the last thing that I have at my door before my students leave is a stop sign. And the stop sign says, "What did you learn today?" And that's an important cue for language learners and for any students really, to stop before you walk out of the art studio and think, what did I learn today? Tip number 6, teach common misspellings. Okay, so I have a confession to make. When I was growing up, I had the most difficult time remembering the difference in spelling between collage and college. And we all know that collage is a type of art. And somewhere along the way, some teacher was generous to me and taught me this little trick, that collage is a type of art, so the A means art. And then college is a type of education, so the E means education. And from then on, I've not forgotten how to spell college or collage. So look for ways in your vocabulary or your everyday teaching to give your language learners these little tricks, because this will save them in the end from making a simple mistake for the rest of their life. So tip number 6, teach common misspellings. Tip number 5, create language objectives. Language objectives can be created from the ELP standards, the English Learning Proficiency Standards, and I've included a link in your handout. You can download this entire packet for free, and they're full of 10 basic standards that are important to teach to language learners. Some examples of language objectives that I've created in my classroom are for a level 1, and that's a student who is just barely learning how to say hello and greet you in English. You want them to be able to identify that an artwork has symmetry or has asymmetrical balance. An important term that you must use is the term I can. We need our language learners to be able to do something, so we don't just make the statement, we actually say I can. Tip number 4. Did I mention visuals? Well, in case I didn't, I'm going to mention them again because that's how necessary they are for the ESL student. So I've got this job board here, and when my students come into class, they look at the job board and they find their number and like, oh yay, I'm the teacher assistant, or oh yay, I'm the masterpiece manager. And for the language learner, they're not going to know what masterpiece manager is, especially if they're level 1 or level 2. So next to the text that says masterpiece manager, we've got a little picture of a man holding up artwork. And so that's going to help your language learner know, yes, I'm supposed to pass out or collect or do something with the artwork. And then if you go down to floor inspectors, I've got this little guy with his broom and he's like mopping the floor. Well, that's going to give your language learner an idea that their job is to pick up the trash on the floor. So again, use your visuals. They're only going to help you. And my favorite visual in the art room is this little stick man here, because come on, how many of our students love to draw stick people? All of them! And how many of us despise stick people? Yes! What art teacher wants stick people in his or her classroom? Well, not me. So I've created this little visual of this stick guy with the red circle X through thing, so my students know, all of my students know, especially my language learners, that stick people are not allowed in the art studio. So tip number 4, don't forget about your visuals. Tip number 3, utilize graphic organizers. Graphic organizers are a great visual aid for English language learners to gather their thoughts and organize their thoughts. And I'm sure you've heard your teacher colleagues talk about graphic organizers, and maybe you've even used some in your classroom. So get them back out, put that artwork on the board, and teach your students how to read art and to write down thoughts and things that they see using their graphic organizer. Now, when you start doing critique, I've got a little tool for you here. This critic's hamburger, or burger or cheeseburger or whatever kind of burger sandwich you want it to be, is a great way to support your language learner. It gives them a place to put a positive comment, a suggestion, and another positive comment. So it teaches our students to be positive, but it also gives the language learner a place to organize their thoughts. And on this particular burger, I have sentence frames, and sentence frames are simply sentence starters. And your level 1s, 2s, and 3s language learners will really thrive when you give them sentence frames. Even when they're talking, you can give them a sentence frame to begin talking, or like on the critic's hamburger, when they're writing, you can give them a sentence frame to help them get their sentence started. It's going to help them find success and be more confident in the words that they do choose to use. So tip number 3, use graphic organizers. Tip number 2, make real-world connections. Use the experiences that your language learners have and use them to your benefit and to your advantage in your classroom. Here's an example of an experience that I've used in my classroom. The pencil hospital. Is your pencil broken? Will you sharpen it for me? No, I won't sharpen it for you. Take it to the pencil hospital. This is a great place for your language learners to just have an experience maybe that they're already familiar with. And so we have a drawer up here for sick pencils, pencils that aren't sharp. They put their pencil in here and they trade it for a healthy pencil, one that is sharp. Not only does this help your language learners make real-world connections to what's happening in your art studio, but it saves you the time of stopping in the middle of class to sharpen pencils. It saves your pencils because when you sharpen them, you just do it a little bit and then you put them in the drawer and they're just there, ready to go. So tip number 2, make real-world connections. Dun 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 dun! Tip number 1, make a home visit. If I could encourage you in anything with your English language learners is to get out of the classroom and experience them outside of the classroom. If you can grab your counselor or your ESL teacher and just make a home visit to one of your students, it's going to mean the world to them. Not only will it mean the world to them, but you'll learn a little bit about their family and their home life, and you'll be able to make a connection with them that maybe no other teacher has made. And one little tip from a teacher that used to live in Honduras, that was me. When we would make home visits, it was very important for us to not deny any food or drink or gifts that the Hondurans tried to give to us. In their culture, if you deny anything they try and give you, it's very offensive to them. So I just encourage you to step out of your comfort zone, get to know your students outside of the classroom, and I think you'll find that the connection goes way beyond art when you just branch out just a little bit and reach out to the families and show them that you care, even outside of the art room. So thanks for joining us in the conference, and we look forward to seeing you at the next conference. As always, happy art making!